Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, aka Multipaul, sort of a duplicate joke there for fans of the comics, and this video we're breaking down episode 4 of Invincible. Throughout this we're going to be discussing the Easter eggs, major comic book differences, and our thoughts on where things could be going. Now I am going to be trying to keep this as spoiler free as possible, but due to discussing some of the changes, there may be minor things that hint towards what's going to happen in the show. I won't reveal any of the major twists, but you might want to dive out if you're someone who likes to go into stuff completely blind. Anyway, if you're still here, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into episode 4 of Invincible. Okay, so the episode itself has some big deviations from the source material, and I was actually surprised early on how much things changed. Whilst the Mars chapter is pretty much the central part of issue 18, outside of that there are some really cool change-ups that make it so you can't predict what's coming even if you do know the work. Now we start off in Egypt and see a shady figure with a scarab tattoo on his hand approaching an excavation site. This scene isn't really in the comics at all, so whether it's a gag or setting things up for the future, we don't know yet. At this dig they've unearthed the tomb of an ancient mummified godlike creature who will bring great suffering to the world. This moment is clearly a play on not only films involving the mummy, but I also feel that it's aping Apocalypse from the X-Men franchise. Apocalypse was thought to bring forth, well, the apocalypse, and this supervillain came from ancient Egypt. The movie X-Men Apocalypse features his resurrection, and though this one is cut short due to the tomb slamming shut on his head, expect to see some change-ups for this with him potentially coming back, or just being dead. Now whether this pays off in the future, yeah, we don't know, but the episode is filled with foreshadowing, and a lot of this comes early on as we join Mark and his father flying across the Sahara. Mark flies too close to the ground, and this causes a sandstorm to arise, which is later repeated on Mars when he does something similar. Beyond that, the pair travel to Mount Everest, where they have a father and son moment. Now not to get too spoilery, but I'm sure you can already surmise that Mark and his father will probably end up fighting at some point. In issue 12 of the comics, the pair end up fighting in a snowy landscape, which is where the fight culminates, and I feel that this father and son moment will be repeated later on in the season, but with the pair at each other's throats. Nolan brings up that humans don't appreciate how beautiful the planet is, and this very much justifies the mentality that he possesses, that he should control it and decide what they do and don't do. This is very much reflected in the speech in which he talks about Viltrum and how they as a race have ended many wars across the universe. In Nolan's eyes, they have brought peace, but as we get further into the series, we learn that the World Betterment Committee had some nefarious dealings. Nolan is an orphan that lost his parents, and he states that his wife Debbie turned Earth from a job into a home. Throughout this episode we see their relationship far more fleshed out than it is in the comics, and also get the feeling that Nolan is wrestling with choosing his duty over his family. The pair also race home, and Nolan wins even though Mark has a head start, cementing that he's far more skilled than his son is. Elsewhere we join Deborah and Olga, the wife of Red Rush, who is furious that her husband's killer has not been found. Olga wants to go home, and as Debbie is a real estate agent, she agrees to sell her house. However, Olga carries a warning that everything isn't going to be sunshine and rainbows like their husbands promise, and this clearly itches away at Deb. She returns home and searches for Damien Darkblood, and it's clear that the series is taking him in a brand new direction. I didn't even really mention him that much in the breakdown last week because in the comics, he's pretty much just the butt of a joke. Damien is enlisted to get to the bottom of who killed the Guardians, and it becomes public knowledge exactly what happened. He then shows up down the line and says he's cracked the case, but at this point the entire world already knows. Voiced by Clancy Brown, this cross between Hellboy and The Question has a lot more to do in the story, and he very much surmises early on that Nolan is involved. Nolan grows angry at him throughout the episode, and worried that he's going to give the game away, Cecil ends up exorcising him and sending him back to hell. Now Darkblood makes it clear to Nolan that Deborah is starting to suspect something, and it won't be long until Mark does too. We later learn that Nolan planted the blood of the Guardians in his office, and therefore Steadman puts things in place to make it seem like the framing worked, even though it confirms for Cecil that he was the one behind it. Now I love how Cecil very much shows his strategist side throughout this episode, and even though Nolan believes he's in the clear, Steadman very much has his eye on him. We also start to see Amber and Mark's relationship developing, and in the comics, Mark really struggled with having to constantly rush off all the time to help save the world. Before he departed to Mars, she actually started to question whether he was a drug dealer or not, but here they keep things simple and say he's just volunteering on a trip. Amber is way more likable than how she is in the source material, I feel, as in that she's sort of just a ditzy blonde, whereas here she seems a lot more grounded and nuanced. Cut to Mauler, who we find building another clone. I'm glad that they're putting another one in place, as the best bits of banter in the book come from the pair constantly arguing over who the original is. Though we don't know why he was freed by robot just yet, going off the comics, he was let out for a specific reason that I'm going to talk about at the end of the video. They clearly have this scene here to show that he's a master at biology, and it does paint out he's going to be able to do what Robot wants, basically. Mauler also beefs up his brother with bergamot patties, which are of course from the place that Mark used to work. We join the new Guardians of the Globe, who arrive at the headquarters, which are basically just the same as the last ones. Black Samson refers to how he was an original, and this annoys Rexplode, who's quickly becoming the comic relief in the show. Cecil clearly doesn't want any messing around, and he's left a lovely blood stain on the wall to remind them what could happen. Now Monster Girl and Rexplode do have a bit of a flirt, and in the comics she falls in love with him, but he doesn't want anything to do with her because she looks so young. Monster Girl is actually quite an interesting character, and we discover that she's actually 29 years old. The monster inside of her is a curse, and every time she mutates, she gets younger, whilst it gets more and more grotesque. Robot tells Rexplode to stay away from her, and this is actually somewhat flipped around in the comics. The source material had him telling Monster Girl to stop flirting with Rex, as it makes him uncomfortable. She broke down, and he offered to find a way to help her, which involved taking a skin sample. However, later on, he did also take one from Rex, which we see repeated in this very moment. Either way, I do appreciate that things are flipped around, and we'll discuss the eventual goal of this at the end of the video, in case people don't want spoilers. Now shortly after, we see Nolan having an argument with his wife, and he very much gives the impression that he views her as being beneath him. It's clear that Deb is starting to suspect something is up, and the fact that Nolan refers to her like this shows how much he looks down on humanity. If he talks to his wife like this, then you can imagine how he regards the rest of the race, and the foreshadowing here is really good. Cecil arrives and breaks up the argument, but the pair realise that their relationship's being strained, and they decide to go on a date. They aren't the only people getting romantically involved either, as across town, Mark and Amber kiss. Mark returns home to find Cecil, who has a job for him, which involves guarding the first manned mission to Mars. Now in the source material, this happened after the fallout between Mark and his father, but here they reframe it so that Cecil can attempt to investigate Nolan whilst he's off planet. This doesn't work, and Mark ends up just going off on the job himself, which is what happens in the comics due to his father and him not getting along. Jump across to Adam Eve in school, who's having second thoughts about the hero lifestyle. After all she's been through, she's second guessing her choices and has realised that life isn't all it's cracked up to be. Mark is still very much at the start of his journey and still sees mostly good in the business, but as he will likely discover, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Mark promises to be there for her, and this furthers the love triangle between them. Eve warns him that he has to be serious about Amber if he's going to tell her his identity, and in the next scene he holds back from doing this, but he does buy her an $800 chest, which, let's be honest, though, probably stole it. Yeah, if I had super speed, yeah, I would have stole it. No, don't dislike the video. Now Mark heads out onto the shuttle, and we see that he has to have breathing apparatus. Viltrumites can actually hold their breath for 2 weeks, and thus him being half human has its limitations. A hilarious moment happens when we see the Vulture-esque character that the Immortal tossed into space just floating around, and as the guy said, when in doubt, just toss him into space. The trip itself has several callbacks to the comics involving not only that Vulture guy bit, but also Mark biting into a frozen sandwich which is ripped directly from the panels. We catch up to Nolan, who's angered by this trip, and it's clear that he wants his son near to him so that he can control him, rather than having him going off and doing his own thing. Deborah realizes he's changed, and Nolan tries to bury the hatchet by taking her to her favourite restaurant. During this, a dragon attacks, and this could be a callback to the comics, namely Nolan's origin story when we see him fighting one that looks a lot like this. Unlike that though, he decides not to tackle it, and leaves it for Cecil to handle. Now I really like Debbie in this episode, as we see how she knows she's being lied to, but rather than accepting the truth, she's happy to live in this as it keeps her safe. On Mars, the explorers are taken captive by the Martians, and we're also introduced to the Sequids, a race of mind-controlling squids that are playing on Starro the Conqueror. Like Starro, they attach to one's face and take over someone's body. Their race is capable of invading planets once they have a host, as they become a hive mind when this happens. It becomes very clear that this is the way the story will be going, as one manages to attach to an astronaut named Russ, whilst a Martian shapeshifts and takes his place. Thus I can imagine Mars being devastated, which will lead to the Sequids journeying to the Earth. Now the Martians of course look extremely similar to Martian Man, who was a prominent member of the Guardians of the Globe. Based on Martian Manhunter, that hero came to Earth because of a war on his planet, and though this didn't involve anything like the Sequids invading it, it does line up slightly. Mark is taken before the Martian Emperor, voiced by Dimon Honzu, who warns him of the dangers that the Sequids pose, and he says that he must execute the astronauts in order to be safe. Mark saves them, and once more this entire scene is pulled directly from the source material. Now the human transforming does set up Shapesmith, who is the character that this one becomes. It will be interesting to see if they focus on him more in the season, as in the comics he comes a bit later after the big arc with Omniman and his son is done. With the Graysons out of town, dark blood goes through their house, and we see him rummaging through the cupboards upstairs before he realises that Cecil is in the property with him. The episode ends with an ominous look in this very same cupboard, so I'm guessing that there was something left behind by him here. Mark makes it back to his mother and father, getting it on, and when this happened in the comics, we realise that Mark knew what was going on, because Nolan had put her shirt on backwards when moving at super speed. Mark returns and gives Amber a rock from Mars as a gift, and Cecil takes Darkblood in to exorcise him. Cecil has figured out a way to do this with his tech, and it's a big change up from what was happening at this point in the comics. Darkblood says that he won't see Cecil in hell because there's a worse place waiting for him. Probably Justice League, I'm guessing. Now it is possible that he can come back and that he left a piece of himself behind at the Graysons' house, but I'm completely just theorising at the moment, so let me know if you disagree. Next we join Deb cleaning up Olga's home to sell it. She comes across a wedding photo of the couple and does find joy in it, even though we know that she's very much doomed just like how they are. Deb is back to being blinded by love, but as we know, things probably aren't going to stay that way. Cut to robot, and this is where we're going full spoilers. Yeah, we're going full spoilers from now on, so duck out of the video if you don't want to know what's happening here. Okay, so if you're still here, then either you've read the comics or just want things ruined. Now in the graphic novels, we watch as Robot clones a body from Rex, and using the Mauler twins he attempts to put his brain into it so he can become flesh and blood. So this is why he freed the Maulers and also took the skin sample. This arc is happening way earlier than it did in the comics, so it's going to be interesting to see if the fallout from that remains. Either way, this was another great episode, and I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone who watched the last breakdown, as I was absolutely blown away by the numbers it got. Obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the latest, so make sure you comment below and let me know. And also, shout out to Christian from Beyond Epic for editing this video. Thank you very much, Christian. I know you're the only one who cares about that, but if you're commenting yet, as a thank you for interacting with the video, you'll be entered into a prize on the 30th of April, in which we're giving away 3 copies of Zack Snyder's Justice League on 4K. All you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the episode. The winners of last month's competition are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at Heavy Spoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of Omniman, which will be linked at the end. We go over all his origins and explain the big twist, so if you've got an itch you can't scratch, then definitely head over there. With that out of the way, thank you for sitting through the video. I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.